Many of us dream of owning a classic car, a prospect only made more exciting if you fix and maintain it yourself. But running a classic car is a very different experience from a modern one. So Andrew Evanson, Senior Operations Manager at Lancaster Insurance, visited Ralph Hosier Engineering Limited to get some beginner's advice from the mechanical maestro himself, Ralph Hosier. He also brought his son Frankie to pass that passion for classics down the generations. The engine is the heart of the classic car experience, but old machinery requires sympathetic care and servicing. So what do you need to know to keep your classic running well?
Yeah, so when you're servicing the engine, what you've got to remember is all the fluids you're putting in it, the oil, the coolant, they are components of that engine, and they're just as important as all the other components of the engine, camshaft, pistons, all the rest of it. So you need the right tool for the right job. And the choice of fluids is enormous. So when it comes to engine oil, it's not just the viscosity, the big numbers on the front there. It's what's in the oil as well that helps it out. Every oil's got a load of additives in it that make it last longer, that help it cling to metal surfaces, so that next time you start the engine up, there's still a coating of oil on it. Cheap oils are made from base stock that will break down fairly quickly. It'll start breaking down and it'll start getting higher rates of engine wear. More friction, more losses. Those losses in the engine mean that you end up spending more on fuel. I had a car once where, when I got it, the fuel economy was 30 mpg, and after one oil change, because the oil really needed changing, after that it went up to 45 mpg. So the amount you're spending on fuel more than offsets what you'd save by using a cheap oil. So good quality oils are really, really important. So the big numbers on the front, they tell you how thick the oil is, how runny it gets. And a lot of them are what we call multi-grade, so 10W40. The winter setting, when it's cold, is a 10 grade oil, and when it's hot, it's a 40 grade oil. If the oil gets too runny, then it will just fall out the sides of the bearings and you won't be able to maintain oil pressure. If you use an oil that's too thick, it can't pump it through fast enough, and you'll start getting oil starvation in certain parts of the engine and possibly too much oil pressure at the front end of the engine. Now, synthetic oil is exactly what it says. It's made synthetically by actually taking individual components like esters and things like that and blending them together. Much more expensive process, but it means you don't have all the impurities in, so the oil lasts a lot longer. Now, you might have seen classic oils, and what they're talking about there is the additive pack that works well with the sort of bearings and surfaces, the metals you get in older engines. So the amount of zinc you have in there, ZDDP and things like that, they will affect how that oil reacts with the metals inside your engine. Older engines with like white metal bearings and the such like need a completely different set of additives to a modern car that doesn't use any of those sort of metals. So it's quite easy to accidentally buy something with the right viscosity and completely the wrong additives in there, and in the long term you'll ruin your engine. So right tool for the right job. The other thing that you'll be putting in the engine when you service it is the coolant. And you might have seen a couple of coolants around there, red coolant or blue coolant. But actually, there are literally dozens of different types of coolant about. All of these coolants naturally are clear. The colour comes from the dye they add to it. So the red types of coolants are the long life stuff, such as OAT, and they can actually start attacking some of the materials you find in older engines. The blue coolants tend to be ethylene glycol based, work really well on older engines, but they don't last as long. And over time they become acidic. So if you leave your coolant in your engine for too long, it'll actually go from helping it to hurting it. So you need to change the coolant. With blue coolants, typically, for most of them, you're looking at a 3-year life. With the red coolants, you might be looking at 5 years life. Then we've got the other bits and pieces like oil filters. It's quite easy to think, well, I'll change the oil, but I'll leave the oil filter. But all the oil filters have got metal parts inside and they degrade over time. So if you don't change the filter, then the oil can't be filtered through that filter anymore. And all engines, well, pretty much all engines, have a bypass system. So if this clogs up, then it builds up pressure and a bypass valve opens and unfiltered oil starts going through the engine. If you don't change your oil filter, you end up basically not having an oil filter at all. You also need to think about your fuel filter. Again, most fuel filters have got metal bits inside them. Either it's a plastic body, but there'll be like a metal mesh inside that's holding the filter element in there. And I've seen these where they've been left for so long that the metal mesh inside has actually gone rusty, started breaking down, and then a whole load of debris goes through the fuel system, ruins your carburetor, ruins your fuel injectors, and then you're into quite a large bill of fixing those. Have a look at the belts as well. The auxiliary belts, they're made of rubber, that perishes and they start breaking down. So if you've got a rib belt, bend it back on itself, see if little cracks open up, you know it's perished. And the belt sits into those V shapes. And it's the side walls that actually do all the driving work. And as the belt wears, it sits further and further down in that V and becomes less and less effective. And eventually you'll get slip. And once it starts slipping, it gets very hot and eventually it will snap. Now, if you've got a car with a cam belt, you can't see whether it's wearing out or not. So what I'd say is if you've just bought a car, an old car, and you think the cam belt might have been changed, but the previous owner was a bit vague, change it anyway. Do not take any risk. And also make sure any tensioners that hold that belt in place are renewed as well. Because a big cause of engine failure is the tensioner that holds the cam belt in place fails, cam belt slips, pistons hit the valves, wrecked engine. You also want to check that your air filters are in good order. Most of the time we use paper air filters, which these work extremely well. And the small particles they filter out are the sort of things that end up grinding the inside of your engine down and leading to a higher engine wear. Now, if you leave your filter too long, it clogs up and that restricts the amount of air going into the engine. On a modern engine with fuel injection, it just means you get less power. With carburetors, they'll actually start increasing the vacuum on the intake and you start pulling more fuel through. So you'll start running richer, leading to a more bore wear, higher fuel consumption and more engine wear. Doing your air filters on a regular basis is also really important. Again, good brands make all the difference. So if you get all of that lot right, your engine will last quite a long time. But there's other things to consider servicing, particularly on an older car, that don't necessarily come up on the normal service checklist. One of them is things like fuel hose. You've probably seen quite a few things recently. Ethanol content in fuel and the effect it can have on hoses. All rubber perishes. Cracks can appear, but even before cracks can appear, chunks can fall off the inside of it and start clogging up your fuel system. You need to buy the right sort of fuel hose. It's worth replacing it every 10 years anyway, to be perfectly honest. For petrol vehicles, we'd use hose that's classified with the American classification R9, and that means it's good for quite high ethanol contents and it'll be fine. The older R6 hose, or even older, will deteriorate over time. And of course, when we see what's printed on the outside, this has got all the right numbers printed on the outside, the right approvals and all the rest of it. Anyone can print that on a hose. Doesn't mean that's true. So you've got to buy it from a reputable supplier to know that you're actually buying genuine fuel hose. And genuine fuel hose, ethanol tolerant, lasts a good 10 years. So if you just bought an older car, change the oil filter, change the fuel filter, change the air filter, change all the fuel pipes, cam belt, if it's got a cam belt, change that, and the tensioner. Change the coolant, completely drain it all out, flush it out, replace with new. And then you'll have something that will last for years and years and years. And it will give you a great deal of driving pleasure.
So, buy the correct, good quality fluids, keep everything clean, replace any aging rubber components, and make sure that you're running all the correct spec parts and servicing at the correct intervals. Do all that and you'll have a healthy engine that's reliable and smooth.